It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilly.
Hi, and welcome to the show. Today, my guest is Jill Rickel. Jill, who is a CEP, is the founder of AO Therapeutic Consulting, a consulting practice specializing in therapeutic and special needs placements for children, adolescents, and young adults. Jill has expertise in working with clients who have learning, social, behavioral, emotional, psychiatric, or neurodevelopmental disorders. Jill graduated summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, with her bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Miami and her master's degree in counseling psychology from Nova Southeastern University. After serving 8 years as the National Director of Admissions for a private post-secondary program, in 2006, Jill became an independent consultant and founded AO. She subsequently became a certified educational planner, which is where that CEP acronym came in earlier, and is a professional member of TCA, IECA, NATSAP, and YADA. Jill travels throughout the country using her clinical and program experience to evaluate schools and therapeutic programs and works with families from all over the world to find the most appropriate academic and therapeutic environments for their children and young adults. Let's not wait any longer. Let's get to the interview now with Jill on today's edition of Success is Subjective. Jill, I'm excited to have you as a guest on the podcast. We're already over here giggling because this is the kind of like bantered relationship that we have, which is like really good natured. But I hope that that also shows up on this interview because us being humorous and sarcastic would like, that's real. That's authentic us. So I'm excited to have you as a guest. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It might show up. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Joanna.
It might show up. Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple questions, but we're just going to see where this interview goes. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I know some of your story personally and professionally just because we've known each other for, a while enough where I've kind of heard bits and pieces. But for people that are listening to this that maybe aren't familiar with your story, why don't you tell the listeners, where did you grow up and what was the message that you were receiving from your family about what you were supposed to be doing after high school?
Great question. I grew up in Montreal, and I moved to Florida when I was 15 because my family moved to Florida and I had to come along with them, and I was told I was moving halfway through 10th grade, which was pretty well thought out by my parents not. And that's actually, the move to Florida, a new country, a new surrounding, at a very impressionable time in life is absolutely part of my story. So I spent the rest of my quote-unquote childhood in Florida, but I actually think it was an adulthood in Florida and a childhood in Montreal.
Very well thought out. Not a poor time to move. And not from, I don't want to minimize a move from, let's say, like DC to Florida, but we're talking about Montreal to Florida. That sounds, in my mind, like even more culturally drastic, but maybe I'm assuming.
No, it's a good assumption. It was culturally drastic in every way, shape, and form.
So, okay, now you're 15 in Florida. Did the message or kind of what your path was after high school change once you landed in Florida, or were you on a similar path?
I don't think I ever recall getting a message before coming to Florida. It was sort of just you're a kid, be a kid. Moving to Florida, everything changed because, again, I was halfway through 10th grade. And in the US, or at least in Florida, everybody went off to college. And in Montreal, everybody went to college, but everybody went to McGill or the colleges there. There was culturally, you stayed at home with your parents for much longer. And yet kids were way more mature and way more independent than I found coming here. Parents were more trusting of their kids. So everything changed in that here, everybody was looking at to where they were going to go away to school. And for me, I had just gone away and I had no intentions or desire of going away to another school. So very much a part of my story is that I was a very good student who, moving here, I kind of didn't care about school. It didn't make sense to me, but I had the ability to be a very good student. And thinking ahead towards college, I just went to what was easy, which was University of Miami around the corner, had a very serious boyfriend from the time we were good friends when I was 15, started dating when I was 16, didn't want to leave him. He was from Montreal, shared a similar background, not a surprise that it felt so comfortable. He happens to still be my husband 40 and a half years later of marriage. So that was crucial as well, that I didn't look ahead to where I wanted to be, what I wanted to study, what my education should look like. I just took the easy route of going nearby. And my parents, I think, were totally thrilled that I would walk down the aisle and become Mrs. Rickel. And that was the goal.
Wow. Okay. So many things that I want to, like, can we just have like a sidebar conversation of like the keys to a successful marriage? That's not even about we're talking literally, this podcast is about success. So how do you have a successful marriage? I think like maybe some of the listeners want to hear that. I certainly do, as somebody who's only 3 years into my own.
I think that there are one simple answer. If you have the same core values, because if you don't have the same core values, that's a whole different story. But if you have the same core values, the success is there's no other option. If you believe there's another option, you'll take it during the hard times. If you believe there's no other option, you'll do what it takes to work through it. And I'm not a believer that you stay married always, no matter what. I do think it's appropriate to not be married at times, but to me, that's the key. It's not easy. So there has to be no way out. Like, how are we going to work through this one?
Yeah. How do we work through it together? Okay, good. I love that. Thank you. That was a little sidebar. Like, I just needed some personal advice, maybe. Okay, so going back to your story, here you are, your parents are totally supportive of you going to school close by, which again is kind of it is a product of the path of which kind of like you saw and were raised when you were in Montreal. So that's not off base. You were quick to walk down the aisle, but you had a long-term partner. Obviously that worked out. And parents were supportive of you in that regard. So, I mean, tell us maybe even some of the high points of like, how do you go from being successful in college to being married and into the work world at such a young age?
Yeah, that's another interesting part of the story. So I, like I said, went to University of Miami. Did not go on scholarship, didn't even know what scholarships were. Remember, I came from a world where the college, even the verbiage was new to me, didn't really care, didn't really know. But while I was there, I was like, oh, okay, I'll apply for this one and that one, and kept getting them, and graduated with a 4.0, summa cum laude, all these scholarships. But I graduated 6 months early. Remember, I talked about being an adult? From the time I came to Florida, I just was looking forward to being an adult in the adult world because I didn't identify with the adolescent or child world of being where I was. And so I graduated in 3.5 years on December 12th, and got married on December 18th. So I was engaged at 21, married at 22. Went into a master's program because I didn't want to be in a PhD program and spend the first however many years of married life studying and taking exams. That was sarcastically like dumb. I was really dumb. So I got married at, engaged 21, married at 22, got my master's in 10 months and had a baby a week after I got my master's degree, had my second and third, so I had 3 kids by 27, and decided that being a full-time stay-at-home mom was the only way to go. That was the way to raise kids appropriately, and fully look down upon people who worked full-time as not doing the right thing for their kids. That was my mindset all of those years ago. So imagine graduating Phi Beta Kappa, summa cum laude, with all of these accolades, and nobody saying, idiot, why are you rushing through a master's program and not doing more? But nobody ever guided me that way. It was perfectly wonderful to be walking down the aisle and being a mommy and staying at home. And I have no regrets about that. My kids are amazing, but it's not who I really was as a person. And it took many, many years for me to discover that.
Well, and let's let's just dive right into that, because it sounds like at some point you had a very clear vision of like, here's my job is to be a mom, right? And like you said, you kind of frowned upon or looked down upon anybody else that was full-time working because they were parenting very different than what you thought was like the way to be, especially the way that you were parenting. So at some point you ended up entering the work world, because that's how we cross paths. And gosh, I'm just so smitten with you as a colleague. And so tell us when and how you ended up transitioning or closing the chapter of stay-at-home mom as a full-time job to entering a non-parenting work world.
Sure. So interestingly, years and years later, when I once again told somebody that I was a stay-at-home mom and I never worked, my husband reminded me that I always worked. And I actually didn't see it that way. I was either the president of some organization, or I decided to make a little company making hair barrettes and stuff that I had seen that I thought I could copy, or I was working for a magazine selling advertising space, doing a summer camp section. I mean, how I got into all these things, I don't even remember. Or tutoring. I used to tutor graduate level statistics for like a lot of hours a week. But why didn't I remember that I did all those things? Because I never worked the hours that my kids were home or awake. It was nap time. It was during school. So I just thought, I'm a stay-at-home mom who doesn't work. And actually that wasn't real. When my youngest was in 5th grade, my husband's business went under, and he was, I say he because to all the world, I will say, I didn't know that there were financial difficulties, and I found myself having significant, serious financial difficulties that one day I didn't know they were there, and the next day it was huge. And I had to go back to work. So I found my way into a program. I cried a lot that my 5th grader would never be okay because I was going to be that mom that had to go to work. And I found myself working for a program, tutoring statistics, tutoring psychology. And I worked during the hours my kids went to school. I stayed there for about 8 years doing that, never wanted to be quote unquote more full-time. And then that business was sold. And it was sold to a large company, which our colleagues are all going to know what happens when the business is sold to a large company. At that point, I was director of admissions and marketing, which I created all these roles for myself. I would go to my boss and say, we need a marketing department, we need an admissions department, we need this. And she would give me free rein and I would just create it. So at that point, I was admissions and marketing. And for 6 years had been going to IECA, Independent Educational Consultants Association, conferences on the other side of the table. When the business was sold, and I was not interested in being a used car salesperson telling people to send their kids to something I saw was not going to be good and was falling apart, I went to a conference to talk to my colleagues. I didn't go to any breakout sessions. I just went to a conference for IECA in Miami to talk to my friends and colleagues about what can I do with all this knowledge I have and all these consultants I know, and every single one of them talked to me about becoming a consultant. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. Why would you want me as competition? And they said, you have a master's degree, you're well educated, you're ethical, you're smart, you know the business, we'll help you. And I said, okay, I can't be a therapeutic consultant, but I'll do college counseling for kids with special needs and coming out of therapeutic programs. And that was it. That's what I was going to do. And my very first client, the end of the story is going to became a therapeutic placement. And I fell into starting a career well into my 40s, I guess, and never imagined where I would be, how I would be, what I would have created, and where I am now. And it all happened because I had to go back to work. And I've completely changed my view of who I am and what I wanted and what I should have done and what's right for me. I don't judge anyone else for their decisions with their children and their career, but I have a much better understanding of myself after having gone through that.
Well, and having heard that too, I'm gonna echo quickly. I do think that when I think of a consultant that's ethical, right? Like your picture is usually the first one that pops into mind for me. And so I'm just gonna like validate that the way you show up is also how I think other people see you. But having heard the journey, especially because, like you said, like this was almost a required, right? A forced change. Overnight, it was no longer like the plan or the path that you had envisioned was not what could still stand. You had to financially be available to provide in that situation. And thank you for being honest about how that, you cried a lot, right? Like that was a very hard, it sounds like you were grieving the loss of, again, how you were picturing the next 8 years while your daughter was still at home in middle school and high school. But with all of that said, up to where you are now, and you're still in South Florida. So knowing that you've got this consulting practice and it's taken off, do you see yourself as successful?
Great question. I see myself as extremely successful. I see that because I'm proud of my practice. I think my practice has a very good reputation. I think we do incredible work. This week and last week, we came into people's lives who were already in treatment and completely misdiagnosed, and we caught it, my team and I think we changed the course for people. So I think that we're known to take hard cases and do a lot of work on the back end and really be a part of a team. So I'm really proud of that and really successful. And there's another part of me. There's another side of me that goes back to that girl who went to University of Miami and did her master's in 10 months and coulda, woulda, shoulda. I should have gotten a PhD. I often Google PhD programs and won't do it because there's no value other than to me to wear a sign on my back that says, I got a PhD because I could, and I'm smart enough, and I should have. So then I decided, well, I really should write a book because that's out there, right? And or all of our colleagues listening, and we live in a very private world. My friends and, even family don't understand really what we do. We'll never know my reputation in the field. It's a very private accolade, right, in terms of my world around me. So there's that part of me that if I would have gotten a PhD or I would have written a book, there's something about me that still is longing to be recognized for that girl who graduated Phi Beta Kappa summa cum laude with a 4.0 that didn't pursue. So yes, I'm successful. And then there's that part of me that still has to work on why do I feel like I still publicly have to acknowledge something that was missing from those days.
All right, so I'm going to ask a loaded question. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, like being on the fly for answering. So if there's a young person that's listening right now, or a parent of a young person that almost is eerily similar to Jill circa 21, 22, is there anything that you haven't already said that you would advise that person to do or not do?
No, because I had to go through my process. No, because I actually have guided one of my, I have 3 kids and 3 have spouses, so I won't say who, but one of my either kids or in-law kids to stop work for a much needed reason at a very young age and say, you can go back later. Look what I accomplished at a later age. So to say to somebody, you have to do it now, you have to do it at 21, 22 and fulfill your dreams because your other path isn't right, that wouldn't be fair. That wouldn't be the right thing. I think you can find ways to be successful. You can find ways to fill the hole that you might leave by not doing something you thought about doing early on. And I think I'd be hypocritical if I said, go for it all when you're young, because I'm actually advising people right now not to. So do what your heart thinks is right and what your head thinks is right and what's needed in your life at the moment that you're making the decision.
Okay, I wouldn't have expected anything less from you. Gosh, Jill, like way to deliver. Okay.
But you know what? I do want to share one more thing. Can I go back? Because
yeah.
I think that how I actually decided to do this whole consulting thing, I missed a really important point. When everybody said become a consultant, I didn't think I could. I didn't understand how I could do that. How can I decide to do this? And I thought long and hard about it, and I can, and I can't, and I can, and I can't. And one morning I woke up and I knew from the bottom of my soul that I couldn't do it. And I decided that day, I'm not doing it. I will find something else to do to earn a living. And that was the day I did it. That was the day I incorporated, because I have children and I have a daughter. And I thought, the day you know you can't is the day you have to say, I will. And I jumped in the day I knew I couldn't, and I did.
Okay. So last question, Jill, we're kind of closing out. You talked a little bit in the beginning about how some people, like even folks still close to you, don't have a complete sense of the work that we do. I feel like that's my problem too. I'm constantly like, how do I explain very simply and succinctly what I do without confusing people? But all that to say, I do think that there's still space, and there's obviously still a growing trend of people that are stepping into this role that might have an idea of what a therapeutic consultant is. Now in 2024, right? Because we're at the evolution of therapeutic consulting continues to shift. I'm just curious if we can wrap up this interview with you specifically sharing with anybody listening who might even be remotely curious about launching their own therapeutic consulting practice. And obviously you just gave some really good advice. If somebody's on the fence, just do it, right? Now's the day to do it. But is there anything specifically professionally, educationally, like, I don't know, like what does somebody need to be a therapeutic consultant now?
They don't need much to be a bad one. That's the first thing I would say. And going back to, this is a little off topic and totally on topic, people said to me, how did you learn how to be a consultant? And I said, I didn't. I learned how not to be. Because remember, 6 years in admissions at a program, I saw and worked with a lot of consultants, and I knew what I didn't want to be. So I just did the opposite of many. So it's easy to be a lazy consultant, or what I consider not to be a very good consultant. And I think that most people know sort of the obvious things, right? Empathy, meeting clients where they're at. I think for me, it's something that I taught Amber, who works with me for 10 years now. It was one of the first things I said. If you're going to work with me, you've got to make a decision. You're going to be good or you're going to be popular, but you can't be both. You're not going to be popular with parents when you're telling them what they need to hear, and you're not going to be popular with programs when they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's the first thing I would say is, if you're looking to be everybody's friend, you're not going to be good at what you do. You've got to be, a shit disturber, pardon the language, when needed, because that's what we do. I think you have to be good, you have to really be serving the child or young adult who can't speak for themselves, and not serving the parents. The client is the young person, the customer are the parents, and while you should fulfill your contract ethically, giving them what they want is not fair to the client who can't speak for themselves. So sometimes you're not going to be popular with parents. And I think that the other piece, two other things. Please don't place people based on symptoms. If you're not getting to the core of what's going on and why the symptoms are coming up, then you're unfortunately keeping them on a hamster wheel they've probably been on for many years, not finding the right help. And the last thing is, it's not just where you place them, it's what you do after they're there. The work that you do to make sure that a program is doing their job, that parents are hearing what they need to hear, that things are going well, to me is just as important. And I would say, stay with people as long as you can to make sure that things are going well. But I'm really disappointed. Am I allowed to say that I'm really disappointed in this podcast?
Why?
Because I thought you were going to say, you're so good, we're extending an extra 30 minutes.
Jill, we can table it. We'll do a Jill interview 2.0.
Well, then now I feel so much better, Joanna. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure to chat with you, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, I appreciate you. We'll make sure, honestly, for folks that, twofold, why you're talking about your personal journey leading to where you are, and then obviously we're kind of transitioning to kind of wrapping up on the professional side of things, and also the imparting advice, because we are certainly reached out to. I'm sure you are. I certainly am. And sometimes I really wrestle with, how do I give advice to people? So I think it's really valuable what you just shared. And I also think that there's an opportunity for people to reach out to you. Obviously, we'll share your contact information in the show notes for anybody that wants to check out, obviously, hiring you as a consultant, or just reaching out to you if there's any particular professional request. But thank you again for carving out the time. Like I said, I obviously have so much respect for you as a fellow therapeutic consultant in this very intimate space.
It is. And you're like one of my little babies. I have my little group of girls that are my babies. So I don't know how I got to be one of the elders, but you're one of my baby girls.
Well, I love that. Thanks again.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email Joanna at lilyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.
Do you have a teenager or young adult who seems to have lost their way? Maybe they need help navigating adolescence, adulthood, and decisions surrounding higher education. Or maybe they have become withdrawn, their grades are slipping, or they are flat out living a reckless lifestyle, and you're concerned about their health and well-being. If this describes what your teen or young adult is facing, a therapeutic consultant may be able to help. Mental health, addiction recovery, and higher education can all be equally expensive. Well, information is everywhere. How do you know what option is the best one for your family? Some parents have the time to research and navigate this on their own. Some don't. If the latter applies to you, enter Therapeutic Consultants. Therapeutic consultants, like Joanna, listen to your family's specific needs and advocate on behalf of your loved one. TCs will research therapeutic resources, recommend treatment programs, and assist during adulthood transitions. Not being affiliated with any program, their support is completely objective and catered toward the best interest of each unique family. To find a qualified therapeutic consultant to work with, check out TCA, also known as the Therapeutic Consulting Association. Their website is therapeuticconsulting.org, all one word. Again, that's therapeuticconsulting.org. Then click the Find a Pro tab up at the top.